before we start on the slideshow, we're just going to learn a little bit about Richard. Richard's a really, really good friend of mine, going back 20 years or so. Works within Triumph FC, owns Triumph FC, and also, or DOC of Triumph FC, my apologies. And then is also, he's worked for the US seven-a-side Paralympic as an assistant coach to Stuart. And he also coaches in our City FC program. So his Triumph FC is part of our City FC program in the Elite League. So really good friend, known each other for many, 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 many years, and really good top guy. So knows his stuff. So I'm going to let him take over and just give it a little bit of a context about who he is and where he comes from, and then we'll go into the presentation. So Richie, carry on.
Okay, thanks for listening in. Sorry for the technical difficulties. That's probably mine and my age more than the equipment. But anyway, in talking to Anthony, I was very proud to be asked to come on and do a webinar, and so wanted to do a topic that's going to be very relevant very soon, and that is, how do we get back to play, and how do we get back to practice? How do we get back safely? So that's really where I am. Obviously come from England, moved over here in 2001 and been working in the DFW area for the last 19 years. So all good there.
A little bit longer than that, actually. I think you was with Challenger before that, since 99 or something.
Correct, yes, we were working here obviously a little bit before I actually moved here. So I moved here in May 2001, and I've been here in full time. So that's all that good.
What about your playing days?
Playing days, played for Brentford until I got injured, was in the youth setup, got injured, went semi-pro. From there, worked in construction, took on my coaching licenses, came over via Challenger Sports to do all the summer camps, and obviously got offered a full-time gig here, and then started my own club, and that's who I've been working for the last 17 years.
Good. So a little bit of a background on Richie there, and Brentford, I think, are moving into their new ground, I guess, in the next season, or hopefully if there's going to be a season. Pretty exciting. So Brentford, for people that are listening, is in London. It's like the west side of London. You'd pass it if you're coming from Heathrow into central London. Real nice. Actually, I think the old stadium's pretty nice. It's pretty close to the action, but some good stuff. Okay, so while we're waiting, I'm going to change over. I'm going to share my screen. Richard's going to do the presentation, but he's going to let me know when to change the slides. So just give me a second while I do the screen share and get everything set up. It says, which is not doing it again. Let me try again. For some reason now, Richie, you've given me the deal where it's not sharing my screen.
Hey, there we go. See, technical difficulties.
Oh, cure me. Okay. Cancel. So let's go here, make presenter.
Okay, so while Anthony's doing that, obviously for the people listening, it's definitely uncharted waters for all of us, soccer coaches, players, parents, in how we're going to get back safely, and negotiate the shark-infested waters that are still out there for everyone. I'm sure that a lot of parents are extremely worried. I know as a coach, we're still extremely worried, because from a selfish point of view, if I get sick, that's gonna cost all my teams. We don't have many other coaches that are able to get out there and coach my team should I fall sick. So we're trying to do everything we can to be as safe as we can.
All right, can you see my screen?
I can see it.
Okay, that's good. Let's see if I can make it go big now. I've not used the slide. How do you start? I guess, how do you make it big? I've not used Google before, but let's see if I can make it big here. Presenter view.
That's it. That's good.
You got it?
I can see that. That's good.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, so perfect. So here we are, a return of practice, safe practice. This is something that we are doing for our club. Everything is personalized towards us. There will be people, I'm sure, if coaches are listening in, will look at it and say, we don't want to do that. That's exactly what I've done to other people's webinars when they put something on like this. I listened to many clubs across the US. Everybody had different ideas of what they thought they were going to do for their clubs. I definitely took some. I definitely added some of my own personal stuff that I think is going on. We even added something last night when I spoke to my parents. Something had come up, and we found out that it was a great suggestion from a nurse, actually. So if we go to the first page, Anthony, we move up. Okay, so here we are, Triumph Safe Practices. Before practice, we are still toying with the idea of either the temperature to be taken at home or before entering the field. As a club, we are definitely looking at getting some radar guns, temperature guns to take before they enter the field. Is that going to be accurate? We're not quite sure, but we also can't be sure that everybody's going to take the temperature of their kid before they come to practice. So this one is still up in the air for us, but we are definitely going to take the temperature of the players before they enter the field or come to practice. Every player must have their own ball. Now, I know Anthony has probably a different view than me. The reason why we want them to have their ball is coaches will have a bag of balls. The balls will get put up after practice. Next group comes out. We use the same balls. There's no way to disinfect them. That's why we're having them have their own ball that they're taking with them to cut down on some of the disinfecting and sharing of a ball. So that for sure. Every player must have their own training bib. We as a club have just gone out and bought every one of our players a brand new training bib so that they would take with them, wear that and wash it and bring it back the next practice. Every player must have their own water. We are not going to share water. Players must stay in cars until called for via phone message. We use TeamSnap, and we are going to text people when it's ready for our practice and safe. Parents must stay in cars. That's a good thing and a bad thing. I like interacting with my parents. We socialize a lot, but they're going to have to stay out the way. Players to go and sit in a designated circle. Now, I heard this, that coaches were going to put cones out and that was going to be the spot for the player to go and sit. Well, that's great. They probably don't coach girls like I do, and girls love to talk. So I thought it would be much better if we designed a designated circle where the cones will be a minimum of 6 feet apart and they're all facing each other and they can talk. Each player can have their own hand sanitizer. Now, this is going to be a tricky one because if you try and go to the shops, you can't buy it. So, again, we're not making it mandatory. We would like them to have it, but the club is very lucky that our president works for the alcohol industry, and they're the ones that are making hand sanitizer. So we have been inundated with hand sanitizer that we are going to set out for the players to be able to use at different stations. So we're lucky as a club to be able to definitely have a lot of hand sanitizer out there for the kids to use and the coaches. This is one that I hadn't heard, but I thought was very important. Next one, players assign practice groups to make social tracing achievable. And what I mean by that is, should one of our players catch the virus, we need to know who they practice with so we can send them a note that they're going to have to go into quarantine. We can't do that if we don't know who they're practicing with. So it's very important to us at every practice. They're going to be designated the 4 players that they're going to practice with constantly. And if we go to 8, I will make sure that the 2 groups are noted together so that should any of them catch the virus, we're going to be able to pre-warn the rest of the players they practice in. We have decided, and I know Anthony and I have talked about this, that no toilet facilities are going to be available at this point. Again, we can't guarantee that it will be disinfected at the appropriate time after people have been in there. So we think that's a liability. We are not going to make a toilet facility available. Okay, next slide. Okay, during practice. Again, parents to stay in cars, players to maintain social distancing as much as possible, with the help of obviously practices, of which I'm designing. It's not going to be perfect where everyone's going to be, 6 feet away the whole time, but we're going to do our best to make sure they do that, and you'll see some of the sessions a little bit later of how we're going to try and make that achievable. No high fives, no handshakes. No sharing of water. This one is still up in the air for us. Masks to be worn by coaches and players if ordered by local county. We're not sure they're going to order it. Would it be good practice for us to wear? Sure. And a parent who's a nurse told me last night it works like this. If both of you were naked and one peed on you, you're going to get urine on you. Now, if you had jeans on, you might not get as much urine on you. If both of you wore jeans, neither of you are getting urine on you other than the person that was trying to urinate. So that's how she described it. So she said, if you told me that we are not going to wear masks, my daughter would still be there. So that was good. She said it's good practice to wear them, but we totally understand kids running around in the heat wearing masks, coaches wearing masks. Look, that's a matter of opinion. And some players might actually want to wear them, some players might not. So again, we're leaving that a little bit open. If we are ordered, we are definitely doing it. We have an order placed for Triumph masks, and it's sitting there waiting to go. Again, we're not going to make the parents order the masks. We're going to actually buy them for them. Group numbers as instructed by local county, no more than 4, no more than 8, no more than 10, no more than so on. We're at an unknown right now. I know some clubs are practicing, even though Denton County, who our club actually comes under and practices, have specifically said no contact sports, which includes rugby, soccer. So we are definitely listed. Get my teeth broken in, definitely listed as a sport that shouldn't be practicing, and we are not practicing. So we are going to wait and see, but obviously the numbers will be dictated by what the local county tell us we're gonna do. The next one is a big no-no for me on the kids. No cell phones to be touched or passed around during practice, which, especially if you've got girls, they do that a lot. That is something that I need to be all over and make them totally aware, because touching a cell phone, if you've got the virus on your hands, now can very quickly be spread to other family members. So no cell phones at all. One of the parents had told me that their kid needs it to test their blood sugar level. That's great. I said, well, we'll make sure she's good, but she must use hand sanitizer before touching any of the equipment again, or touching her phone. No spitting of water, no chewing gum or fluids of whatever around the fields. We certainly don't want that. I know that's probably more of a boys where they swill the water around and spit it out. We don't want that to happen. And then no touching of the coaching equipment as best as possible. It's sometimes you might run into a post, but we don't want players picking them up. We don't want them what could be spreading the virus even more. So no touching of the equipment other than what the coach does. So next slide, please. Okay, after practice. Practice times to be staggered to allow the team or group to leave before the new group enters. We don't want people crossing over and getting close to each other. So we're going to stagger it probably by 10 minutes, maybe 15 if needed, to make sure one group has gone before the new group comes in. Again, depending on numbers, we're not quite sure what that's going to look like. Players go straight to car, no congregate, no talking to their friends, other than being 6 feet apart, but we want them to leave as quick as possible. Take all equipment with them, bibs, ball, water, etc. Do not pick up or touch practice equipment. We're going to actually set up fields in grid sizes of 6 squared, so we're going to do 6 squared boxes by probably 5, maybe 6. So we're going to make something around a 30 by 24 area, and it's going to be lined for them. So lessen the amount of equipment that's out there. So we're going to use those grid sizes. Any personal items left at the field will not be picked up by the coach. I'm always picking stuff up. I'm sure Anthony is as well. And we pick it up and we take it in the lost and found and someone wants it. Well, of course, with the virus, we're not sure who's got it. We're not sure what's going on. So I'm not picking up anything. I will be telling the kids we are definitely not picking up anything. Any coach-parent conversations? You know how the parents like to talk to us after practice. We will definitely be having those via email, text, or phone. So then we put a sort of a disclaimer. It's not really a disclaimer, but we're saying these are guidelines that will be constantly changing and reviewed every week. Numbers in groups, i.e., social distancing, contact will all change over time. Our aim is to ensure the players and coaches' safety from the first day we step back onto the field to the final day when everything goes back to normal. Triumph will not update these guidelines, but will communicate to the parents of the new changes. So this is the guideline that we're going to start with once we get back to practice. And obviously, we're not going to update this and keep sending it out. We're going to let people know, hey, now we can come in groups of 10. Here's what we're going to do. And so on as they open it up and further down the line. We have also implemented this with a letter that the parents are going to have to sign. This is not a waiver. I specifically told the parents we will not be sending you a waiver. I know some clubs want to send the parents a waiver saying basically that if anything goes wrong, then you're releasing them of any liability, the coach and the club, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. I feel personally that the parent will be trusted, but my parent nurse told me it will be so much better if you got a form signed that all the parents had seen the list of safe practices, that to sign it and say, hey, we agreed to abide by it and we've seen it, which I thought is a great idea. So we're definitely going to get the parents to sign a form saying, hey, we've seen it, we understand, we agree, everything's good, much like we do the code of conduct for the parents at the beginning of the season. So before I move on to practices, was there any questions, Anthony, that you had or anybody else on our safe practice?
So currently there's no questions being written in, but of course, I think whatever we come up with, I've been talking to Richard, and I've spoken to a lot of my parents as well, and also a couple of people I lean on just for help. And for those that haven't seen, I think most of our parents have been sent it, but if they haven't seen our safe practices, there could be some things that are not in ours that are in Richard's and vice versa. But ultimately, I think the ultimate reason we're doing this is because we feel concerned and care about our players and our parents. And I think there's possibly other clubs out there, and we don't need to be talking about them, but I don't think they have anything in place. And going into the unknown, they have nothing to be able to give support to the parents with. So really the reason why we're doing this and the reason why we're having this this whole seminar or this whole webinar is to really show that we know how serious this is. We want to make sure the kids are safe, and ultimately we understand that those kids could go home into a different environment where they're looked after by their grandparents, or the parents may still be working. So we just need to be very careful. And for us as Storm, one thing that wasn't put there with Triumph, and I think Richard probably be the same, I'm not sure, we're not forcing anybody to come to that practice. If you don't feel confident and you don't feel ready to come to practice with what's going on, we don't expect you to. Nothing's ever going to be held to that child or family. Richard will probably touch on that in a minute as well. I mean, we're staying loyal to our kids and to our families to make sure they'll be signed up in July, because they've been loyal to us and we're loyal to them. So there would be no fear of any child not getting a place on the team for next year because they felt concerned about coming to a practice in the new normals that we're in right now. At the same time, though, we do expect those players to continue that can't come to practice to continue with their individual learning plan from home. So that's something that I had to just add in there. And really, I think, Richard, we're not too far apart on what we're doing. I think we're all aiming for the same end game here, which is a safe return and a return that makes parents understand and feel that we've thought it out and we've made sure that we're trying to be as safe as possibly can. And let's be honest, you can only be as safe as you can be. I mean, that doesn't necessarily take away the threats or any type of contact that we can still have. We're just trying to make sure that if we're on the same page, then I think we won't be part of the problem if we end up going back to square one. We want to make sure that we're part of an organized, well thought out process for coming back and for organizing our practices so that we can continue with the federal, the state and the county and the cities to be able to continue the reopening and coming back to whatever the new normals will be.
Yeah, very much so. And there are a couple of things that you mentioned there. You know, one of them was brought on last night, who said, well, what about players that want to come out to open practices? You know, how do we know what they've been doing? And it was brought up, you know, they need to be reading our document. They need to be signing the document before they even enter the field. They need to understand what we're expecting of a player that is coming out to want to come out to our practices. You know, it's open practice season. So that I hadn't even thought about. I mean, you completely forget about that. I was just thinking about the players. And also, I also wanted to say, again, from a selfish point of view, and I told my parents this last night, I got to keep myself safe. The most important person when we're out there to do practices is me, because if I'm gone, there's nobody else to do practices. So from a selfish point of view, I got to make sure I'm extremely safe, first and foremost, and the kids second.
Well, to add to that, you're also the coaches possibly doing 2 to 3 teams and staying out there to go from team to team to team. So ultimately, making sure the coach is safe, it stops all that extra contact with the rest of the teams coming in.
Correct, exactly. So again, you know, in saying I'm being selfish, I'm actually safeguarding the rest of them by trying to keep myself safe as best as possible.
So we did have a question coming in from Jeff Milby, who's actually one of my assistant coaches on a couple of our teams. So Jeff, so you have to understand, Richie, we've got a lot of Storm people listening in on this. So
sure.
Is this just another club's view, or is it comparing with what Storm is doing? So to answer your question there, Jeff, obviously we put our RTP out, well thought through. This webinar was probably put together with Richie. Richie and I talk a lot. And when I mean a lot, I mean we're on every other day, if not weekly basis. So to come up with a webinar when we had organized webinars, we thought this would be absolutely the right timing to do it. So for Jeff, we've got our RTP out, and that, as it says in the RTP, can be amended as we go along. We hear things and we understand things. And then Richie's put his out for his club. So yes, what you're watching now is what Richie is. We've given you what ours is, but the forum right now is the ability to be able to talk about what we're doing, what Richie's doing, and then really making sure that working together we can come with the right plan. There's some great ideas from Richie that we might not have thought of, and vice versa. And maybe there's some questions out there from the people that are listening in that we haven't thought about, that we've given you a voice as well to make sure that, you know, from the outside in, we're doing what we think would be the best possible way we can do it. So yes, this is Triumph's coming through. We have ours, which I can show you, or you should have been sent, but they're not too different in reality. There might be a couple of things that Richie's doing a bit more, but you'd also listen to when Richie's saying it. You know, some of the things like the temperature, they're still in between how to do it, how to make that work, how they would monitor it, how they would police it, I guess, and who's going to do the temp. So there's a lot more. There might be a little bit more detail in Richard's there. Not saying that we haven't thought about that detail. We just eliminated a couple of things that we put it to the parent to make sure that they, in our RTP, so the differences there, Richie, would be you've got the measurements and you're looking to do the temperatures. We look to take that away only because I don't know if we can police it. I don't know if we can have somebody in the front doing all that. So we put it into the parents by saying if they've got no, if they have no symptoms, or you're saying they don't have any symptoms, they don't have the, you know, the temperatures from the parent, we're leaving it on the parent to make sure that we trust the parent. The parent's going to look after their kid, and they're trusting us to make sure that we're doing the same with everybody else. So hopefully
of course, and that discussion with that, Anthony, is, you know, if we go with doing it ourselves and get the guns out there, I can't do it as a coach. Somebody else has got to do it, which now means you're exposing them to another person being out there. So of course, it's whichever way you go, there's always probably somebody saying, hey, it could be better, but we're trying to decide which is going to be best. Exactly as Anthony said, for our club, everybody's going to be different. Everybody's going to be different in different parts of this country.
And I would say within our area, I have to be honest, I think we put ours out, you've got yours going out. I don't see much else from anywhere else. So really another reason for the webinar here is also to gather that information, gather other people's thoughts, to make the best practices so we can do the best for our kids, whether it's Triumph or Storm. Ultimately, we're City FC. So we still work together. We're not, you know, after all, we're people, we're friends, and we just live in different parts of Dallas here. So we want to make sure that the best safe practices are put together and get the best possible process for us to come back and continue to be back. That's the key here, I think. And also mitigate the chances of somebody else getting it. We're not being ruthless about it. We're not being blasé about it. We're making sure we understand how important it is, and how important it still is to make sure that A, the kids want to get out and play, and B, that they stay safe while doing it, and we mitigate as much chances of them contracting the virus as possible.
Correct.
Okay, that was the only question we had, Richie. Sorry that went on a bit long, but I think I needed to just make sure they understand this coming from you. But you know, I mean, together, I think it's a collaboration to make sure we got the best practice coming back, and it does make people think and start talking. So, all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, this is where I'm starting to earn my corn, because it's so easy to go on YouTube. Doesn't matter how good of a coach you are, you can go on YouTube, you can find any sessions on there. But the one thing you won't find is social distancing sessions, because they haven't existed before. So I've been putting together some practices. Again, some coaches will say, hey, I like that. Some coaches will say, well, I don't like that. But in the coaching community, if you're a coach, you take something and adapt it for what you like. And that's what I've done with some of my practices. Now, am I guaranteeing that the kids are going to be exactly 6 feet apart every practice? It might not happen, but I'm putting them in 6-yard square boxes, as you will see as we go through this, to try and lessen anything. We will have no contact, I'm sure, once we get back to practice. And again, I built a few off of 4 or less, and I built a few off of 8 or less players. Now, there could be a case of where a coach would like to come, and so now we've got 8 players out there. Well, guess what? You could use the groups of 4 and have 2 groups of 4, and you've got your 8 working, or you can put all 8 together. One of the things that I was very adamant that I wanted my players to do was not just do skills. Our players are doing skills right now at home via the Topia app, of which they're loving. Topia allows them to watch a video of a coach doing the skill. They go out and practice the skill. They video themselves doing the skill. That gets downloaded. The virtual coach looks at it, which is actually a real person, gives them feedback whether they passed or whether they failed, what they needed to do better, and then they either go back and practice it or they move on to the next skill. So the last thing I wanted to do was make our practices as skill-based as possible, because they can do that at home on their own. So if we move on to the first session that I put together. Okay, here's one that I actually used for fitness, but I needed to adapt it to make social spacing. So we have a little cone set up. I actually have these cones with poles that fit over there. It could actually be hurdles, and it's one player being the server. They will not pick the ball up with their hands. The other player is working. So as you can see from the left side, one, it's a pass out, it's a pass back. What I try and do on the technical side of that is play it to their outside foot, not their inside foot. So on that there, that would be the right foot of the player working. The player then quick feet over the hurdle, comes out the front. It's a quick give and go on 2. It's a quick move over, give and go on 3. Back over the hurdles and out, and it's a quick give and go on 4. The players then don't rotate. We keep going for a certain amount of time, anywhere between 30 seconds to 1 minute, of which after that it will be a whistle blown. Then they quickly sprint, and you notice here's where I've had to adapt the practice. Normally they would just walk off to the positions, but I'm trying to keep them away from each other, so players will sprint around the cones to keep them away from the new players that are coming in, and everybody keeping 6 feet away. So very, very simple. As I said, I actually use this. A lot of sessions that I did have that I had to adapt for social distancing would be the 1-to-4 ratio fitness drills that I have, because hey, if we're only going to work with 4 players, I've already got some of that, as long as I keep them away from each other. Very, very simple, easy practice. As I said, quick, high intensity stuff. It needs to be at game speed, no just going slow. Again, the ball must not be touched with the hands. We're trying to eliminate the hands as best as possible. Everything is on the feet. Okay, that's the first one. Second one here. Again, this wasn't a social distancing drill, but I'm having to adapt it to make a little bit of social distancing, and we are working a little bit on technique, a little bit on fitness, and so basically you can do lots of things with this, but the 4 blue cones are actually little goals that you are going to pass the ball through, but they also serve as points. So the first time the player dribbles the ball as fast as they can, quick turn at the middle red cone, back to the next blue cone, another turn, back up to the blue cone, another turn back to the red, and then back out to the blue goal, and it's a quick pass and a sprint around the red cone, again keeping social distancing. Now you can set whatever turns you like. You could work on the same turn if you specifically had some younger players where you wanted to work on maybe the stop turn, the drag back turn, the Cruyff turn, or you can tell them, hey, well, I'd like to see 3 different turns at that. You can even just do it as dribbling with the ball as fast as possible and not even put any turns in. So that the practice is very adaptable. And I'll tell you, once we start going back to contact, I will add this in as a fitness one, and I'll explain how and why in a minute and make it into a competition. We can't do that competition right now because it involves tagging, and obviously we want to keep our social distance. So the ball comes through to the white player, as you can see there. The white player then does exactly the same down the outside and does the turns if you want them to on the other side, and it will be the continuous, just keep going and rotating around. Very, very simple drill, great technical work, and obviously a work to rest ratio of 1-to-4. When I keep saying that, that means you're working for 1 and you're resting for 4. So that would be the ideal start to fitness on a work to rest ratio of 1-to-4. Anything lower, okay, your anaerobic system will work harder. So 1-to-3 would be even fitter. 1-to-2, and the highest anaerobic system we can work, which is your high intensity stuff, is a 1-on-1, of which you can probably do no more than a minute. So again, I have these in reps. We would do this for maybe 3 minutes, fast as we can, rest for 1 minute, back in for 3, rest for 1, and so again, we're allowing the kids to rest because we want them to work as fast as possible. If we continue to go for 20-30 minutes on this, they're starting to get tired, the quality of work goes, and then you're losing everything that you really need. now to adapt it. Obviously, if we were coming out of social distancing, and we can make this a competition, so we can still do all the turns, we can do everything. I would bring the red cone in a little bit closer, or I can even use the yellow cone here at the top. And basically, once the player has passed the ball through the blue cone, again, we won't be using turns on this one. But let's say, hey, we've forgotten about the turns. We've gone up, we've passed the ball through the blue cone. The player that has passed the ball now sprints around the yellow cone and tries to tag the person with the ball. Okay, that person will go down. If they get free, they will then pass it through the bottom gate to the other player, sprint round either the red cone or the yellow cone, and now chase the other person with the ball. So we're making it a competition tag game for the kids to get the ball under control and have a little bit of fun. Again, that wouldn't be social distancing, so I can't add that in right now.
Before we move on to the next one, Richie, we've got a question that have come in. Will there only be 4 players at practice, or 4 on each field, and our coach going between each field? So, Jody, I think I'll try and answer that one. Richie can also add in a second. So what we're looking at now, what Richie's trying to explain now, is how the return to play will look from our county point of view. So if the governor turns around and says we can have only 4 coming back in, to begin with in soccer, then that's why we're looking at these 4 practices. If it comes to 6 or to 8, he's going to go through some of those in a minute. So ultimately, I guess this could also be 8 people coming to practice, and it would be the area would be much bigger with 2 sets of these going on at the same time to make sure we keep our social distancing. But really, this is like best practices for coming in for the numbers that we might be expecting to see for phase 2, if that answers your question, Jody. Richard, do you have anything?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's I see it all the time, and if we want to translate it as best as possible, let's say the governor says, hey, well, contact sports can have groups of 4 or less. You're right, we could set up 10 groups of 4, which gives us 40 kids, but how safe are those 40 kids going to be? So a limit that I would probably do if he opens it up was have 2 groups of 4. That way I can manage them. That way we can still keep social distancing between the 2 groups. And thing, if he says 8, then great. I would probably again look at doing 2 groups of 4 and still doing some of this, because from my point of view is we're not playing again this spring season. I don't care what the leagues are doing. I don't care what the tournaments are doing. We're not playing. So my job now as a coach is we've been off for 2 months. So 1, I need to get them to touch a ball, and 2, I need to start getting their fitness up. Hence that I started pulling some of my old fitness sessions to be able to do some of this for player social distancing and also keep the fitness up and touching the ball. So yeah, very good question.
Good, thanks, Jody. Just send you a private message back. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next one, right, Rich?
Yes, next one.
There you go.
Okay, so this one I do a lot. This one I do a lot with my academy kids and even my older kids, the girls that are in City FC playing NPL and Lake Highlands. It looks simple. It is simple if you can do it correctly. It's not simple if you can't. And so what this drill is player 1 passes to player 2 and follows their pass. Player 2 passes to 3 and follows their pass, and so on. Well, especially for the younger kids get going, and I use mannequins a lot. We have just again purchased a load of new mannequins that we're going to use for shadow play for social distancing. So I use these a lot. I think it helps the kids understand what we're trying to teach them. A lot of kids will stand on top of the mannequin and not have an open body stance. But this whole drill is, can you receive it with 1 touch? Can you pass it with the next touch? If you cannot do that, you are not in a good position, or your first touch was bad. Now, again, it's really a great thing to teach our academy kids, U10 and below, but it's also great to teach the older girls that we're using the correct open body stance to play this. And so, again, this looks simple, but I'm really trying to get them to receive it on the outside foot, which here we're going clockwise, so that will be the left foot, pass with the right foot. Receive left, pass right. If you're able to do that, you're in a good position, one, to receive it, and two, to pass it to the next open player. Very simple triangular work. Again, it works with the 4. Notice that I put the player that's now waiting, because we can't do this with 3, because as they move, there won't be a player ready to receive the pass. So the waiting player will only ever start at that blue cone once the ball's moving, unless it goes out of bounds. This thing will be fluid and nobody will be in 6 feet of each other. I normally do this for the younger kids 5-6 yards, which roughly is 15-18 feet. So there's plenty of distance. So we can work on, as I said, receiving, body stance, opening out, and playing as quickly as possible. Very simple. We can then upgrade it. There's so many. I could have added another 10 dimensions to this, where the ball goes. Let's just start with player 1. Ball goes into player 2. Player 2 plays it back, and then we play a give and go around the mannequin. So the mannequin, it won't go behind the mannequin, it will go in front of the mannequin, and in front of player 2. Player 2 will now do the same with player 3, and so on. So we can play little give and goes around the mannequin. You can use a longer pass. There are so many things. Good coaches would have used this in a square, in a warm-up, and it's all the same thing. So I love the practice, and it really works for social distancing as well. I'm sure you've used that one as well, Anthony.
Oh yeah, many times. And
yes.
But square and triangle. What I would say on that one is, depending on the level of the kids you've got or the quality. I mean, some of them might, the touches and all. The person that's running and following the pass must be aware of the person receiving it, in case it's not been received very well, so you don't get that player standing next to the person that might have had a bad first touch.
Correct, and I could have easily added the blue cones there. That person runs to a blue cone. You can keep, and that would be more so for the younger kids that might have a bad first touch. Just put the blue cones 6 feet away from the starting position, and they're to run there until ready to move forward. So again, we can adapt the practice to whatever we want, and still keep our social distancing.
And I bring that up because we've got a couple of coaches that work with some really young players that are watching here. So that would be something I'd say on that for sure. Just be aware of the kiddos. And I think that cone thing would be a great thing that Richard said, have another cone there. So they run to that cone, and then when the player's left, they can move on to the top of the triangle or one of the corners of the triangle.
And move into the open position. Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Next one.
Next one. So next one. So again, after doing all these practices, kids want to have a competition. Kids want to play. The one thing we cannot do is scrimmage. Obviously, there will be no contact. So one of the challenges is, how can we get kids engaged? How can they feel like they've left practice, they've had competition? Now, we play this a lot with all the kids. We have more players. I have done it at a basic 2 versus 2 right now, and normally we don't have a grid when we play this, okay? But obviously with social distancing, we are gonna need to have it in grids. So again, I'm doing everything as 6-yard squares, and what we have in the middle of the cone goal. Now, it's got to be big enough to span both squares, so both players, depending on where the ball goes, can play. And we call this soccer tennis. Again, we can have different rules. We play to nothing above waist height. That will be the first one. But I can also, if you've got poles and you've got some of the latex bands and everything else you can do there. You could bring the latex band between the poles and make sure the ball stays on the ground, and play it that way. But right now I wanted to show you how we start off with our basic thing. So the kids are in the squares. The first player will serve the ball across to the opposite team, and making sure it goes in the square. The first serve must go in the square. After that, that player now has to play his teammate, okay, with the first touch, and the teammate now has to, on the touch again, so they only have 2 touches, 1 each, has to get it through the cone goal. Now, it doesn't matter, I've just shown it here where all 4 players are touching the ball. It doesn't have to go like that. He could have swerved that ball and played it to the first player that played the serve. So what we're trying to do to achieve this game, first and foremost, is to get it through the cone goal in the middle. That's the most important thing. Secondly, we need to make sure that the ball is not played more than 1 touch consecutively with the players. So I could have done a 3-touch rule where the 2 players have 3 touches between them. So 1 player will get 2, 1 player will only get 1, but 1 player can have 2 consecutively. So we're working on their first touch, their angle of support, and their weight of pass. Here we've only just done 2, and the ball keeps playing. How do the teams score points? 1, if the ball doesn't go through the goal, the other team gets a point. 2, if the ball goes above waist height, the other team gets a point. 3, if the ball stops in their square, they get a point. And 4, if the player has more than 1 touch, the other team gets a point. So we're actually playing a little competitive game that the kids will enjoy at the end of practice. We're still achieving our social distancing. As I said, we play it with no grid when we normally play this, and the ball can keep running forever. Oh, the other way to score a point, sorry, is if somebody drives the ball and the other team didn't manage to stop it going out of the area. That again would be, so we're more teaching the kids about movement, understanding that where the ball's actually going to go, awareness. You get quite a lot in a simple little game of tennis that's competitive at the end of practice. Okay, here's another version that we play as a regeneration from a fitness week. If we played in a tournament, we've done a lot of fitness. We played in a tournament, we do this as a regeneration. But I also realized, hey, it's great social distancing. So again, I use the poles. I buy a lot of the latex rubber stuff in great lengths because it's very useful to use instead of rope. So we just have a tennis net as high as we want it or as low as we want it. And now the 4 players play against each other. There are 3 touches now, so now we can work on their control. They could play it over first touch, but we're allowed 3 touches and 1 bounce. So the ball's allowed to bounce once in their area. They're allowed 3 touches. They can control it, and then it can go over to any other area they like. So it's much like the game 4 square, but we're playing soccer tennis with it. Again, points scored here was if you make a mistake, you're the one that gets a point. The one with the most points at the end of the game is the loser. The one with the least amount of points is the winner. And again, I sort of drew in a soccer net. We don't have anything under there. I just wanted to show you, hey, what we've done. Put up poles, put up the latex rubber, which I know you can buy extremely cheap. So that's what we do with it. So very simple, easy little game. I think that was easy to understand, Anthony. Yeah. Just playing a little game and how we can have a little competition at the end of practice. So then we move on to social distancing with 8 or more players, or 8 or less, I should say. And now this becomes a little bit more complicated, but it's definitely doable because in talking, and I know you and I talk a lot, and in talking to some of the other coaches, they're all thinking it's shadow play at the mannequins. You know, shadow play can still be creative and no mannequins, and let the players go where they need to with a little bit of direction. And so the next 4 slides are showing you how we can achieve that with 8 or less players. So, and again, I want to say this is totally mine. I adapted it a little bit. This is from a great coach called Michael Beal. Again, I do this a lot anyway, whether it has social distancing or not, but I just realized that we could add a few cones and make this a really good practice for the kids, still get maximum effort, and not the kids not walk away thinking, oh, well, all I've done is just pass the ball all the time. And while we're on this subject, obviously notice that the kids, we are only using the balls that the kids bought. I am again to the theory of, listen, if they take their ball with them, disinfect it, you know, sanitize their hands once they finished it. Hey, the only group that's going to be infected, if it happens, are going to be the group that has used the ball. Okay, so here's how we start. We start from player one over here on the right side, dribbles the ball up towards the penalty area, takes a shot. Okay, that's a very, very simple thing. Now, you will understand if you're looking at this drill, this session right now, that there are a lot of color cones. They will become more important as we move on. And I just wanted to give you a heads up. The orange cones at the top are so when we have 3 players out there, the 3 players have cones to go to, and they're not running and they're not walking off together. So again, to make this social distancing and keeping their distance away from each other, I have cones where they can have outlet to run and do it. I would normally have my whole full team doing this, so I would have 4 lines of 3, sorry. We would have at least 4, maybe 5. Here, right here, I'm only doing it with the 7 players that we got. If you had 8 and we're allowed to do 8, you just add another player in to give one of the 3 players a rest. Very, very simple to add another player in. So again, it starts off with player 1 dribbling the ball in and shoots a goal. They can dribble as far as they like. You don't really want them to dribble up to the goalkeeper. You want to try and get them to shoot outside the box, and you'll see why in the next slide. Okay, and so this is all very fluid. After he's shot, now player 1 now turns around. Player 2 now plays in a pass. Player 1 lays the ball off. Player 2 now takes a shot. So we're combining with 2 players. Again, very, very easy, but I had to do it in 2 slides, otherwise there'd be too many marks, too many arrows, too many things, too difficult to follow. So what I thought, I'd break it down into slides so you can see how the practice works. So the first one, the player's dribbled up, shot, turns around, looks for a pass from player 2. Player 2 plays the ball in. It's a layoff. It's not a give and go. We tend to not set up too much here in America. I try and get my players to set the ball, which is coming back towards the player, not too far, set the ball and allow the player to run in and shoot the ball. Okay, so again, that's player 2. Player 2 will now be out on the field. So we will move on to slide 3. And now the player 3 has now got to play player 1 or 2. And the reason why I say 1 or 2 is because the coaching points to this is, can you play the furthest one forward? And when I do this session, I don't tell them that right at the beginning. I don't give away all the secrets, because I like for the kids to understand and experiment. And you'll see when they do not play the player furthest forward, and every one of them has to touch the ball, okay, the sequence doesn't look like soccer, okay? Because if you play player 2 here, player 2's now got to turn around and play player 1, and then player 3's got to run. It doesn't look like soccer. So the coaching points will be, as you move further on after they've experimented, is, can you play the player furthest forward? And as this moves on, you'll understand why. So you're now teaching the kids, one, here is a little bit of social distancing because I want one of you to go long. Okay, so here player 1 has moved from his position when he first laid the ball off for player 2 and has gone long. Player 2 has come in to support. Player 3 is now doing a 3rd man run. And so the ball goes into 1, back to 2. 2 lays it off, and 3 comes in and hammers the ball, hopefully in the net. You've got a 3rd man run. These kids will now go off via the orange cone, or via, as we're in America, and they will sprint off and sprint back to the starting position. The waiting players will now come forward to the yellow, blue, and red cones, and the process will be repeated for the white players to do exactly the same. Again, when I'm doing this session, I allow the players to be creative on their own first. Let's see if they can work it out. Let's see what they come up with, and then coach what they give us. Don't try and force the coaching points on the players, but rather allow them to. This to me is a great guided discovery session. And again, it works because honestly, on a full-size field, none of these players are going to get within 6 feet of each other. None. If they are, then their whole spacing and positioning anyway on the field needs work. So I can tell you these 3 players here will keep plenty of social distancing and get something decent out of the session. Okay, so that will be the first part of the session.
And for those that are listening in, even as a parent now, you can see what we're doing as best practices to make sure we're keeping your kids safe. And for those coaches that are listening, you can see here how you can build sessions and not obviously keep an eye on the social distancing, but you can create, just like Richard said, some of the sessions he's been doing before, and then realize, well, hang on a minute, this would be great for social distancing. So I'm sure you'll have some in your armory there as well.
And we want the players to be engaged and leaving practice, you know, that we've achieved something. Kicking the ball backwards and forwards from 20 feet away because we're social distancing. Let me tell you, 1, as a coach, is boring for me to coach unless I was actually coaching ball striking. But 2, it's boring for the kids. And so you know what's then going to happen is, well, you know what, I don't feel well, Mum, I don't want to go to practice.
Precisely.
So we're trying to engage. So now I call this phase 2, because the first one, even though it's great, phase 1 is a little bit false. I mean, how many players are going to run from, and I got them here at the halfway line. I only done that to give you a little bit of an idea of the spacing, but the area should be, you know, 30, 40 yards out from goal. So that was phase 1. Phase 1 is not as realistic as it should be, but it gives the players an idea of where to move and how we could combine. Now phase 2 is very fluid and very realistic to the game. So just so you understand, I showed you all the movement. The players will literally start, let's say, maybe 10 yards away. I always put them a little bit outside the box and facing the cones. So that, you know, one would stand where the yellow cone is, one would stand in line with the blue cone, and one would stand where the red cone is. And so they would be in a line at the top of the box. Okay, now here's where the cone comes in. The color cone is called out by the cone. That means that player now becomes the server. So right here, the coach would have called out blue cone, okay? And so now here's what we explain to the players, because again, we're now playing a realistic game, okay? The 3 players are lined up opposite those cones and maybe 5 yards outside the penalty area. So when I call blue, okay, I just watch players' movement. For the first couple of rounds, I watch their movement and everything else. Then my coaching points are this. And again, I don't tell which ones have got to do which. I tell the players, this is what I want to see. One's got to go long. One's got to come short. One's got to go wide. And so if we were doing this on a full-size field, you can already see we're social distancing. So here, the player that started at the red cone has decided to make a long diagonal run in behind the defense. Okay, the player that sort of started at the blue cone has now checked to the ball, and the player that started at the yellow cone has now gone out wide and opened up their body. Okay, so now we've got 3 players doing 3 different things and getting some movement. So again, my coaching point would be to the blue server, don't play it straight away. If I call blue, allow the players to move, allow things to develop in front of you, then play the furthest one forward. Because again, you can play the one short, but now that one short either has to play you the ball back or now has to turn with the ball. So if we can play as far forward as possible, that's what we're trying to achieve in this. So here we play player one, who has gone on the long run. They've now played the ball out wide. Player two, who has come short for the ball, didn't get it, now spins in and goes behind. So now we've got a third man run. And we would have dragged the defense around with that movement, just there. One goes long, one comes short, one goes wide. And so here we got a session that is very fluid, very realistic. And also, as soon as they get the movement, you're definitely going to have social distancing. They're not going to be within 6 feet of each other. And so you can continue to work on that movement. It doesn't have to be the same all the time. It doesn't have to be the same players that are specifically going long, short. Some of the players will try and engineer it and say, well, I'll go long, you go short. No, it doesn't work like that in a game. How do they react? I always tell people you react to the first player's movement. So as soon as you see somebody go long, you know, you could have both tried to go long. One just checks back to the ball straight away, check back, okay, or go wide if you're in a better position. So you're going to react to other people's movement. Again, we're talking about creativity. We're talking about how we can get the players to move, and yet we're still doing our social distancing. So obviously, coach calls out the different colors. They will play with all three balls. They go back to the starting position. And then once blue's gone, then it will be the red or yellow, and then obviously we know where the last one's coming from. And then they then sprint around the orange codes to get their social distance in. The three waiting players who were the servers now come on. They set themselves up in the wait position, and the session starts again. Now, if we was to get away from the social distancing, this drill can become very fluid, where one team becomes defenders and you play 3 versus 1, 3 versus 2, 3 versus 3 to make it even more realistic. But again, we're not having that. I had to adapt this from a practice, from Michael Beale's practice, which I love. And I do this a lot. We've even tried to do this with the under 9s and under 10s. Okay, so a lot of technical, tactical there. So then again, you know, competition. How are we going to eventually get to competition? Well, here's a little bit of a competition. It's not quite, because it's a little bit tough on the players, but here we can work on a little bit of attacking and how to keep possession. So we've got a 6 versus 2. The 2 players are only allowed in the 4 middle squares. So think of foosball, where those players are just going to move across the line, across the squares. So if the player on the right in the white now moves to the left square, to the right square, you would hope that their partner would now follow them to the second right square and try and cut off the passing lanes. That's their job in the middle, is to try and stop the ball from being transferred from one end to the other. Now, I could have just left it in the squares and done. I wanted to make sure that we got some movement and players had enough squares to move into to understand the movement. And again, we're doing this with 8 players. You could add another player in there for the defenders, but then we've got 9 players. So obviously, the teal players here, or green, whatever you can see, it's our practice uniforms. So the teal player there, their job is to try and transfer the ball not above waist height, because it would be easier for good players to just kick the ball over the top, not above waist height, to their teammates waiting on the other side. And they do the same. So now let's move on to the attacking part about it. So what we're going to try and do, if the defenders are very good in the middle and cutting off passing lanes, is how do we open them out? So again, we would look to try and space them. As you can see at the top area, the 2 players are not right next to the player on the ball, because they want to try and open the 2 players in the middle up and be able to play it through a passing lane. How would we receive it? How would we play? All that type of thing we can get into here as coaching points. Is my player's first touch good? Are they set up at a good angle? Are they set up at an angle to receive it? I specifically got this player down here right in the bottom right square to be at a good angle to be able to receive this ball rather than straight on. So they can either play it to their teammate that's with them here, or play a quick pass where the defenders have not moved across to the other side. So again, here we're getting social distancing. 2 players are not allowed in the same square at all in any of it, but at least the 2 defenders can move, much like fuzzball across. And we can work on our little two-man defending, or 2 female defending, whatever we want it to be. Again, a starting of a little competition, but it wasn't competitive enough for me. So what I had to then decide to do was, well, listen, I want a little competitive game. So still in the same grid area, and now we're using the 8 players, 4 on 4, just playing a normal game, except 2 players are not allowed in the same square. So you've got to be very aware about not going in the square. Now, this is a lot harder than it looks, or could be a lot easier than it looks, depending on how good the players are at opening up space, how good the defenders are of moving. So it's you're trying to protect your 3 balls on the cone. Notice I didn't put him on the end of the squares because that would be probably too easier to hit. I made sure that 2 players could probably cover all 3 balls by staying in the center zones. But if the other team was good enough and can open them out, that you can play. It is free play, which means they can move to any square they like as long as that square is open. Okay, and so I think that was about it. Again, that could be adapted. You could have a ball in the middle on that one and play in the middle. You could have a player, put a little circle in the middle, have a player in the middle. There are many variations of that. I just thought that for my players would enjoy that. So even though we got social distancing, we've actually got a little scrimmage going at the end, but we can still maintain of keeping our players safe. Squares are 6 yards, so they're definitely going to be 6 feet apart. Now, where it would become close if 2 players come close to the line, which may well happen. But you know what? If you go out to the mall, because they've allowed us to go out to the mall, you might become closer than 6 feet when you're out in the mall. So.
Okay, so we have switched off the screen share there, so let me bring that up. So Richie, that was really good, and I think ultimately for the people that are listening in, at the beginning was obviously our recommendations for what we expect to come to a practice, and then for those that are worried about, or not worried about, but want to see what we're looking like at a practice, and as Richard said, I think the key point here is how do we keep the kids engaged? I mean, I don't like doing, even when we haven't got social distancing, I don't like a stand 10 yards, 20 yards, 30 yards, whatever it is, and just passing the ball to each other. It's not realistic in a game. You know, yes, you can be teaching ball striking at that point, but it's very boring for everybody involved. So by bringing in some ideas for those, and we do have coaches here, by the way, Richard, that are also coaching in recreational play. So, you know, if they've got those kids coming back, or they wanted to continue those practices and under, you know, the safe practices and the RTP, then there's some great ideas there on really taking what you've been using in regular practice and then applying it in more of a safe distance practice. So and I think to add to that, any practices you've probably done except for free play and, you know, some types of free play and some types of maybe crossing and finishing, but even crossing and finishing, you've probably got that movement as well. You can use, and you can maintain the distance there. Really, it's what you got to be more conscious about is free play where you're allowed to win a ball. Really, this is not about winning the ball, because that would be contact. So any type of play you're looking at would be the social distancing without winning the ball, but maybe you can win the ball just like Richard shown there, pressure cover. You're looking at stopping the ball from coming through your passing lanes. You can even teach at that point better positioning, maybe, because you're not really worried about closing down the space or whatever, because it's not there. You can't close that space down anymore. So you've got your positioning sense.
And it will also allow for people that are not very confident on the ball right now to be gaining confident, because they know they're not going to be tackled. So try and pick the right pass. Obviously, they're not under pressure, and so we don't have that, but it'll allow them to start seeing a little bit more aware of where their teammates are and where they can play it. So there are some good points that are coming out if we're going to, you know, how much social distancing we're going to have to do, that I like.
Absolutely. And ultimately, you know, I've only got one boys team. I'm pretty much coaching girls just like you now. The social aspect of these girls coming back, and the boys, everybody just being able to come back and see each other. I know they're not within, you know, hugging distance, but at least to be able to see each other. And you were talking about being in a circle at the beginning rather than a straight line, is especially for those girls, for that social interaction. This would be great just to come back, still maintain the soccer. I did have a couple of parents obviously talk to me about the interaction with the coach is so much better than obviously trying to read off a computer or anything else. So I think we're doing our best to be able to make that a reality again, but also give ideas to those coaches that aren't, or even are in our club, your club, people else that are watching this, or even the recreational play, that it is possible to maintain an interesting, fun session while still maintaining those distances, as long as you're organized, your session planning is there.
Absolutely, and that was my whole aim, not to just put together. I could have put together 100 boring practices that are so easy to do. I didn't want to do that again, so I've had to challenge myself. I love being challenged, because I've gone through this quarantine, probably you're probably busier than I am, but when a coach has no set date to come back to and what we're working towards, I got depressed. I didn't know what to do. I went many days where I just sat in front of the TV and just watched the TV, because I wasn't sure that I wanted to do anything. And now, with some sort of light at the end of the tunnel and what it could be looking like, I'm re-energized. You know, I haven't had to go to YouTube. I haven't had to go to my books. I do go to my books to look and see what I could adapt. But again, it's got to be my creativity to be able to put something together that we can come out and practice with. And so I'm thriving. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it so much now, that hopefully I'll have 100 practices by the end of the week.
Well, just for me, I think you are right. I'm probably 3 times busier. I can imagine what the parents are like at home that are working from home. They still got the kids. They're now teaching from home. I can only imagine what they're going through. I mean, my work rate went up 3 times, not being able to go on the field and coach, which sounds crazy, but it's true. Trying to put all of the systems in place and make sure we're doing what we've got to do. And of course, I've made a challenge in myself. I've done these webinars once every day for the last now 4 weeks. So for those that are watching, feel free to ask any more questions. We're coming to the end now. We don't want to take up too much time. That's a really good session there. But we've also got another webinar with Mike Vincent that we did, which is also our boss actually back in the day. And then Richie was his boss. But anyway, we have those. His webinar was all about individual training and how that looks under he calls it four corners. We do the 5 pillars, but regardless, it's the same type of deal. So that's also a great webinar to look at, because you can take from what Richard said here, and also with the situation we're in, what does individual training look like when you're at home when we haven't had that practice. So 2 really good webinars there from 2 really good friends. So Richard, do you have anything else to finish off with, or we don't think we have any more questions coming in?
Well, that's great. So either they understand it or they're just totally lost. That's the best.
they've all gone sleep. So,
yeah, maybe.
Obviously, this is recorded as well, so it's there for. Of course, we'll get that to team. Will get that to you for your crew, and we'll have it on our virtual learning center. So for our coaches that are working, because we still have a lot of essential workers here, they can consume this content, and hopefully they would also get some ideas, and I'll help our crew with that. And you'd, I'm sure, help your coaches with that for when we look like we're going to be opening up. So some really good stuff.
Absolutely. And if any of your guys or anybody that's listening that's a coach that would like the sessions that we actually put there today, obviously I use Academy Soccer Coach. I have them. It's not something that's going away. They're actually on my computer. I'll be more than happy to send them via email or whatever if anybody wanted them. Because I know what it's like. It's okay listening and going, hey, that looks great, and then you forget it and you don't have it. Well, if they have it in a hard copy, that's great.
Well, if you don't mind, if you want to send that over, we can actually attach it to a webinar. So therefore, anybody that's watching it would be able to at least have what you've had on this webinar as a handout.
Perfect.
All right.
I can do that.
Perfect. Well, Richie, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've got to come up to your house at some point. We've still got to get that going, but obviously with this lockdown, that's not going to happen anytime soon. We really appreciate your time, and I think it's been a really on point presentation today that I think a lot more people need to probably do, and I'm glad that we were the ones that got to do it. So it's a great stuff, Richie. I appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you, and thank you for everybody that was listening.
Fantastic. Thank you guys for listening. Oh, Mike Vincent just popped in as well, but thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Okay, bye.